Kyrie, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask this question. So you know, go ahead. Do you want to be a Brooklyn Nets still?
Pass it to my left.
The Kyrie Irving situation. The Kyrie Irving situation took an insane twist today. I mean, as time goes on, I'm absolutely shaken up by the fact that we're getting more and more information and the story is getting crazier and crazier. I mean, in this video, I'm going to be showing you a video of Kyrie Irving's reaction to the situation, several cryptic Kyrie Irving tweets, and multiple reports from sketchy news sources and very major news sources like Adrian Wojnarowski alike as to what you could come to expect over this week. There's a lot to cover in this video, so before we get to the content, man, you guys have been incredible this past month supporting the channel. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. I don't know if you noticed, but if there's no news to upload, I typically don't upload to this channel. I'll make sure it's only news you care about. And of course, we also upload shorts of the news that I'm bringing you guys onto my Instagram and on my TikTok, and even periodically onto this YouTube channel. Now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Last time we discussed the situation, we were talking about the fact that Kevin Durant might be planning his exit from the Brooklyn Nets. And that's very much tied to Kyrie Irving's decision with the Brooklyn Nets. Now, you even had Kevin Durant going on a podcast giving his opinion on the entire situation as well, saying that Kyrie Irving is his brother and he doesn't really want to get involved in the business aspect of things for Kyrie as he's making his decision.
You know, basketball is obviously the most important thing, but, you know, I try not to let that get in the way of somebody else's personal decisions, you know what I'm saying? But like I said, whatever happens, the friendship will still be there.
Now, at the same time, over the past 24 hours, we got a bunch of information in regards to Kyrie Irving's stance with the Brooklyn Nets. And some of it is just absolute absurdity from the Brooklyn Nets front office, and I'll be the first to admit that. But the very first thing we saw is someone point blank asking Kyrie Irving if he's going to return to the Brooklyn Nets. Now, this was Kyrie Irving's response to it.
Do you want to be a Brooklyn Nets still?
Pass it to my left.
Now look, man, as someone that is part of the media, I don't know if I'm new media. I don't know if I'm just some dude with a camera that likes bringing you guys news. I don't know what I'm classified as, but as someone that brings you information and as someone that's going into year 4 of doing this, I could tell you that there's a chance that this clip was taken out of context. So Kyrie Irving actually commented on Complex Sports' interview saying, "Welcome to the quote unquote new media. When I smile like that, it means there's more to the story and I'll have my time to address things." Now, I don't know if this is supposed to calm you down as a Brooklyn Nets fan, because at the same time, we're getting way too many sources just flat out saying Kyrie Irving is gone. And it's not only people that are fairly new to reporting like Chris Splash, which I'm going to give Chris Splash his credit. He actually reported on the Kyrie Irving situation a few months ago. And so far, everything he said is true. He's relatively new, but so far he hasn't steered us towards the wrong direction. So the more recent thing that is happening according to Chris Splash, and we're going to bring you Chris Splash, then we're going to bring you guys Woj, is the fact that Kyrie Irving's camp has requested and received permission from the Brooklyn Nets to speak with other teams about sign and trade packages. So before we go to the article, I just wanted to tell you guys that whenever I hear the word requested or received permission to seek a trade, that's pretty much a polite way of saying that Kyrie Irving is demanding a trade, okay? Yes, the language is different, of course, but the fact that they are actually looking for a trade should give you an idea that Kyrie Irving's days on the Brooklyn Nets are numbered. Now, in this article by Chris Splash, he says that the Nets and Kyrie Irving have not gotten any closer to finding an amicable situation that keeps the superstar guard in Brooklyn. As a matter of fact, things are trending in the opposite direction. While Nets GM Sean Marks and superstar forward Kevin Durant have yet to speak this offseason, which of course isn't necessarily true, Kevin Durant came out in a podcast and discussed everything everything a few days ago in our last video. So if you didn't catch that, make sure you check it out. But it also says that Irving's camp has requested and received permission from the Nets to speak with other teams about sign and trade packages, according to multiple sources familiar with the situation. Now, the belief among both league and player circles is that Kyrie Irving is gone and the 7-Eleven era is over before it ever began. Irving only began in 103 regular season games in Brooklyn, a 3-year run ravaged in year 1 by a nagging shoulder injury, in year 2 due to absences for personal reasons, and in year 3 due to Irving's unwillingness to get vaccinated against COVID-19 in a city that didn't create a professional athlete exemption in its vaccine mandate until weeks before the NBA playoffs began. The Nets, as the Daily News reported in late May, have been unwilling to give Irving a long-term contract extension without significant financial guarantees. They do not believe Irving is committed to doing what it takes to be on the floor every game for his teammates, which, with all due respect, man, I can't really blame the Brooklyn Nets. Like, of course, if you don't want to get the vaccine, that's a whole different topic. We're going to stay away from that this video, but you have to admit, when you had a player for 3 straight years, and yes, of course, the first year was an injury, and he was a little bit more aggressive in treating that injury due to the fact that Kevin Durant wasn't even on the floor and the Nets weren't in contention. So I understand the first year, but the second year you had Kyrie Irving consistently taking games off due to personal reasons. That's when the jokes about Kyrie Irving being a part-time player started to become a thing. And then when you combine that with, of course, this past year, the vaccine drama, I don't blame the Brooklyn Nets thinking that Kyrie Irving isn't committed to doing what it takes to being on the floor every game for his teammates. It's one of those things where, like, the most bizarre circumstances are the demise of the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, I said this in the very beginning when Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant joined up together on the Brooklyn Nets, and I repeated it when they traded for James Harden. The only thing that's going to get in the Brooklyn Nets' way is themselves. Now, here's the crazy thing. The Nets don't have the cap space to replace Irving if he leaves as a free agent, and the only teams that have the cap space to sign Irving need much more than the star guard services if they're going to make the playoffs, let alone compete for a championship. Which brings us to some stuff we already knew about. Irving has 6 teams on his radar for the sign and trade: the Lakers, Clippers, Knicks, Heat, 76ers, and Mavericks. A Durant and Westbrook reunion in Brooklyn remains unlikely, according to a source. The Knicks, Mavericks, and Heat are the teams that have the biggest capacity to pull off a deal for Irving, but the Knicks and Mavericks appear to be in a bidding war over Jalen Brunson. And then, of course, the next stuff is already stuff we kind of knew about before I get you guys to what Adrian Wojnarowski is saying, is the fact that it remains unclear if Kevin Durant will want to stay at net if the front office essentially kicks his co-star out of town. Now, in a recent podcast appearance, The Ringer's Logan Murdoch, who built a relationship covering Durant while he was a member of the Golden State Warriors and traveled with the Nets for a 2-week period last season to pen a profile on the Nets star, said Durant feels like the front office didn't grow to understand Kyrie Irving, which makes a lot of sense, man. It seems like the Brooklyn Nets are very my way or the highway with Kyrie Irving, so I can understand why Kevin Durant feels that way. So this brings us to what Adrian Wojnarowski is saying about the situation, which is pretty significant considering the fact that once Adrian Wojnarowski reports on something, that's when you can write it in stone as something legitimate. Woj rarely misses. As a matter of fact, I can't remember the last time this man missed on a report. It says ESPN sources, outside of the Los Angeles Lakers, there are currently no known teams planning a pursuit of a sign and trade for Nets guard Kyrie Irving. No sign and trades can be formally discussed until after 6 p.m. on Thursday. Brooklyn isn't believed to have interest in available Lakers packages. So this pretty much means that any sign and trade that would send Russell Westbrook to the Brooklyn Nets in return for Kyrie Irving isn't something that the Brooklyn Nets would be interested in, which means if you want to see Kyrie Irving on the Los Angeles Lakers, there remains only one possibility, and that possibility
is absolutely absurd.
And this is coming from a Laker fan. The only way the Lakers can sign Kyrie Irving is if Kyrie Irving declines his $36 million player option, and then he would be eligible to sign with the Lakers for the $6 million taxpayers mid-level exception. The deadline is Wednesday to decide decide on an option. That would be by far the most bizarre thing I think I've ever seen a superstar athlete in the NBA do, declining a $36 million player option to take a $30 million discount to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. I want you to understand, in this scenario, Russell Westbrook is still a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. What I'm assuming would be the way the Lakers are going to try to pursue Kyrie Irving to sign is sign for the $6 million exception this year, and then next year we'll pay you what you deserve, which still is something that I've never seen any athlete do in all of my years following basketball, and hell, even following football. You don't see this happening. And I think if Kyrie Irving does do this, it is going to be a shifting point in the entire NBA, where you see players saying to themselves, okay, I've made more than enough money, so yeah, I don't mind taking a little bit of a discount so I can play with a different team. I kind of understand, because at the same time, you're talking about a man that's made $195 million throughout his entire career, which is just absurd amounts of money. So I'm guessing at that point he's thinking, what's another $36 million gonna do for me? But again, I will repeat this over and over again. It is absurd. If that happens, it will be absolutely mind-boggling. But here's the crazy part. It's not only Woj saying that Kyrie Irving's interested in doing this. You also have Jake Fisher saying sources with knowledge of the situation have increasingly believed that Kyrie Irving's willingness to opt out of Brooklyn signed this $6 million taxpayer mid-level exception with the Lakers, where Irving can re-sign long-term in 2023. And Jake Fisher so far hasn't missed either. So, and that's before we even get to The Athletic and Sam Amick and Shams Charanya's publication that say point blank, there are sources very close to the situation who strongly believe that Kyrie Irving is trying to make his way to the Lakers. So this article gives us a lot of information on the subject. It says that there's a guy named Russell Westbrook who is still part of the Los Angeles Lakers plans and who has a player option deadline of his own worth $47.1 million that everyone assumes he'll be picking up by Wednesday's deadline. The Lakers can't afford to make an already sensitive situation even worse by acting as if he's about to be replaced by Kyrie Irving, especially if it's not going to actually happen. I mean, with all due respect to LeBron James, he's no stranger to this type of situation where you have a player that's on the cusp of joining your team, but doesn't end up joining their team and ends up making chemistry very ugly because of a failed pursuit of a player. I mean, look no further than the Lakers' failed pursuit at Anthony Davis in the midst of LeBron James's first year. Things got really awkward once the Lakers failed to trade for AD during the trade deadline. Most folks around the league assumed that the Nets would have no interest in facilitating a Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook reunion, but there are others who believe that may be the best of the bad options in front of them. With that in mind, and considering the James Irving Cavs remain the only team to have knocked off Golden State when it was healthy during this dynasty run, what do you make of all this? So the response to this is, I don't think this conversation starts with LeBron and or the Lakers. This is about the ownership, Joseph Tsai, and what's best for the Brooklyn Nets. Despite his best efforts, Irving has virtually no leverage in this situation. That includes his relationship with Durant. The best short-term option is for Irving to be on this team, because Brooklyn has never really gotten a chance to see how far it could go with a healthy Durant, Irving, and a third star. In this case, Ben Simmons. It's a big if, but if neither Irving nor Durant suffers a serious injury throughout the season and both are healthy for the playoffs, the Nets would have a chance to win a championship. They have multiple trade exceptions to work with this summer. One for $11.4 million that expires on July 6th, and another for $11.3 million, which is good until just about the February trade deadline. They could build around Durant and Irving, and if he decides that he wants to play, Ben Simmons with Joe Harris still on the team. There are two ways Irving is still on this team next season. Either he picks up his option, or he signs a new multi-year contract with Brooklyn that is shorter than what he's seeking. If Irving doesn't want to do that, the Nets are under no obligation, none, to trade him where he wants to go. If he really wants to play with LeBron again and move to LA, he has to go for the MLE. Prove basketball and winning are the main things. It is probably the only thing Irving could do to save his reputation after 4 solid years of destroying it. This is such a harsh article, yet it's such a unique situation. So let me tell you something, there's a lot of funny memes about this situation so far, primarily to do with the fact that Kyrie Irving said that he'd want to remain in Boston and then ended up leaving Boston for Brooklyn, and then said he would not leave Kevin Durant in Brooklyn, but is rumored to be close to wanting to leave Kevin Durant in Brooklyn. I think it's also interesting to note that Draymond Green, who is part of the defending champion Golden State Warriors, is not intimidated of Kyrie Irving and LeBron James teaming up together on LA with Anthony Davis, which I don't necessarily blame him. They've had success against Kyrie and LeBron in the past, and especially considering the fact that Draymond Green just won a championship, I wouldn't necessarily blame him for feeling himself a little bit extra. And here's the craziest part of all. The Brooklyn Nets are prepared to lose both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving amidst these trade rumors. And according to Brian Windhorst, which I'll admit lately he hasn't been hitting on all of his reporting so far, but he is very reputable at that. He said that they would rather lose both than go through what they went through last season, which was a miserable season under the situation that Kyrie Irving contributed to creating. Now, Kevin Durant's displeasure with the Nets has been directly tied to his relationship with Irving, who damaged his public reputation and frustrated behind the scenes over his unwillingness to undergo COVID-19 vaccination amid New York City's coronavirus guidelines. That decision led to Irving playing only 29 regular season games and being a constant source of distraction, and the Nets finishing 7th in the Eastern Conference and having to make the playoffs via the play-in game. James Harden's mid-season trade request was also caused in part by Kyrie Irving's absence. At this point, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. Even if Kyrie Irving was to return to the Brooklyn Nets and they were supposed to run it with him and Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, are you confident that this team could challenge the other top teams in the Eastern Conference for a championship? Look, we've seen bleak situations like this before. It was literally 1 year ago where we were all calling the Boston Celtics a shit show, and we were saying that maybe they should consider breaking up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum because they're clearly not contending for any championship anytime soon. 1 year later, with proper chemistry being built, with a complete front office overhaul, the Boston Celtics became Eastern Conference champions. And although they didn't beat the Golden State Warriors, they challenged them and they were a force in the playoffs. Their future looks significantly brighter. So who knows, if Kyrie Irving does return to the Brooklyn Nets, and maybe between him and Ben Simmons and Joe Harris and Kevin Durant, it ends up working out. But the problem is, it seems like Kyrie Irving's very offended about how he was treated this past year by the Brooklyn Nets. So that would be the main reason he would want to leave. At this point, if Kyrie Irving does want to leave, whether or not Kevin Durant wants to stay in Brooklyn, it's probably your best bet to trade him. Kevin Durant is 34 years old. He recently underwent an Achilles tear. You could trade him to a team with a plethora of assets. I would personally trade him to the Phoenix Suns and at least get DeAndre Ayton in return. That's someone you could build around. It's not necessarily the most ideal situation, but at the same time, if you're not in a scenario where you could build around Kevin Durant and help him win a championship right now, what are you doing holding on to him? There's so many teams that would give you a tremendous amount of assets in order to trade for him, like the Phoenix Suns, like the Miami Heat, etc., etc. You know what's a really fun part about my job? When I go out and record a 20-minute video of all the information that we got from this morning, only for it to be completely shaken up and turned over its head later on in the afternoon. And it seems like that's exactly what Kyrie Irving did. He threw a gigantic curveball for all of us because, according to Shams Charania, we got an official report that Kyrie Irving is opting into his $37 million player option for the 2022 to 2023 season. Now you might be thinking, okay, Mike, well, he could still be traded. Well, Shams actually goes the extra mile to let us know that Kyrie Irving is bypassing on multiple opt-in and trade scenarios to fulfill his 4-year commitment to the Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant. This is absolute insanity, and it completely contradicts everything that the media was being told earlier on today. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was a conversation between Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, or if Kyrie Irving was doing this all on purpose just to take the media for a ride. But I told you guys originally, from the very moment I heard the rumor that Kyrie Irving was considering opting out of his $36 million contract to sign a $6 million contract with the Lakers, that it was very unlikely. No athlete would do that. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. No one puts $30 million on the table like that. So here's what it means. This could potentially be a last dance for the Brooklyn Nets. I'm really happy that Kyrie is opting in, like my Laker fandom aside, because I feel like there were so many questions surrounding this Brooklyn Nets roster. I mean, who knows how good this team could be if Ben Simmons is playing, Kyrie Irving is locked in for a full season, and Kevin Durant is able to stay healthy for a full year. So Woj actually tells us a little bit more about what's going on in regards to this entire situation, saying that without the ability to find a sign and trade deal, Kyrie Irving plans to exercise his $36 million player option for next season and return to the Brooklyn Nets, sources confirm. So what's interesting about this is what I think happened is the Brooklyn Nets said that there's no way we're trading Kyrie Irving and receiving Russell Westbrook in return, because that just wouldn't make sense, one, financially, and two, it would make their team significantly worse. There weren't a lot of other teams that were in the running to be able to trade for Kyrie Irving, which resulted in Kyrie Irving potentially saying, I am going to run this back with the Brooklyn Nets for one more season. Now, based upon how this season goes, we might see Kyrie Irving in Brooklyn for the long term, but I personally think a lot of it hinges upon how the regular season goes. And to be fair, for the Brooklyn Nets, things have been anything but stable and consistent over the past 3 years during the Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant era. This is a team that was able to trade for James Harden, and we all thought that this was going to be a super team that was going to dominate the Eastern Conference. 1 year later, after only playing 16 games together, James Harden demanded a trade. They got back Ben Simmons, hoping that he would be able to play during the playoffs and give him a defensive enforcer that could thrive in transition, but Ben Simmons didn't even play during the playoffs either. So based upon how this season goes, yes, there is a chance Kyrie Irving stays in Brooklyn in the long term. I think it's much more realistic. I mean, this rumor makes more sense. If things don't work out in Brooklyn this year, then yeah, I think there is a chance he could go to the Lakers next year, because then Russell Westbrook's contract will be off the books and the Lakers will have cap space to pursue free agents. But at that point, there's questions about whether or not LeBron James is going to return, but needless to say, man, I didn't think it was possible for the Lakers to get a talent like Kyrie Irving for just $6 million. So we're going to keep an eye on how this scenario is going to go throughout the season. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.